Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our penultimate lesson in First Sons and Last Daughters by Reine. There's only one final lesson after this. There's only one final chapter after this. We're going to look at 295 to 310, and the novel ends at 325, so there's one more lesson after this lesson. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about devastation, the death of a child, specifically the death of a son. And I'll tell a little story here. When I was working on my master's, I hired a personal tutor for German. I needed to learn German for my master's, and so I actually had hired a young lady from Germany as my personal tutor, and I would actually go to her house for German lessons. And she had two daughters, but she did have a son and two daughters, but her son had just recently been killed in an automobile accident, and their marriage was on rocky terrain. It was about to end, and it did in fact end within a year, because whatever pressure there was on her marriage, the death of the son added to it, and their marriage never did recover from it. So very, very tragic. And we've got a similar situation here, and there aren't any clear-cut answers. There are not. And I certainly don't have any, because by the grace of God, I haven't suffered that, and I hope I never do. My son is precious to me. That would be devastating to lose my son. That would be unbelievably devastating. So let's go to block one and get started on this lesson. We're going to begin with gathering at the cross and the question of atonement. The return moment, Adler regains consciousness. Remember, they discovered Adler had fallen from a cliff. The sheriff enters Adler's room with bad news. Gideon had been found. He was killed in a Jeep accident when the Jeep flipped and collided with the truck, and Gideon was killed instantly. Peyton was in the room, and she collapsed into a chair. Adler then asks Peyton to get Father Gabriel. Peyton calls Bryce and asks her to come home. In death, Gideon is even a heavier burden for Peyton. Father Gabriel joins Peyton in her upstairs studio when they get back home, and she confesses feeling guilty because she feels guilty, but also release at the death of her son, who was always mean to her, always a problem. And so she feels guilty about feeling relieved from that, all that negative experience. So she tells Father Gabriel that she is feeling guilty for the feeling of release at the death of her son. What kind of a mother would feel that? The tension between guilt and release. Father Gabriel says, it's one thing to not lament the passing of someone who constantly injured you, constantly caused you pain, but now it is time to forgive all. And then Father Gabriel blessed her with prayer. Father Gabriel tells Peyton, it is one thing to not lament the passing of someone who constantly injured you and constantly caused you pain, but at this time, it is time for you to forgive all. And then Father Gabriel blessed Peyton and prayed with her. So we begin now on block 2 with beginning with forgiveness, because this process has to begin with forgiveness. would Peyton ever grieve her son, and would she ever give Bryce the real chance at life that she deserves? Father Gabriel tells Peyton that she is restored in the sacrament of Christ. She is restored in the sacrament of Christ. Peyton next sought out Adler, who was in her father's old study, old library. Peyton found Adler in her father's old study going over old pictures of Gideon. Then Peyton asked for the whole story of what happened, because this just didn't click that Adler fell over a cliff. And Adler tells her that Gideon had actually knocked him off the cliff, striking him with a limb. Actually, he picked up a limb and actually tried to kill his father. He struck him and knocked him off this cliff. So it was an attempt at murder, a patricide. Obviously, this was Gideon, the evildoer. The whole truth. The sheriff had returned the watch and the ring Peyton had given Gideon, with the inscription inside, "Fear not the end, fear only never getting started." And now, guess who has it? Now this inscription is back into Peyton's hands. She needs to not fear anything except getting started at being reborn as a new eschatological self, and going through recovery by passing through forgiveness as instructed by Father Gabriel, by beginning by passing through what? The sacrament of Christ, the sacrament of the Eucharist. So let's go on to block 3 and take a look at recollections that reinforce the positive. Okay, block 3, recollections that reinforce the positive. The repast, family gathering took place in the dining room. All shared positive memories of Gideon. Finally, Bryce asked the question that they all wanted answered: what really happened regarding her father's fall off the cliff? Peyton simply answered, no detail. She just said it was not an accident. Late night personal encounters during a lightning storm. Peyton and Bryce gathered very privately together late at night in the kitchen. Bryce asks her mother, will this death of Gideon be the final straw, the final incident that pushes my mother, you mother, will it push you into divorce? Peyton answered that, I don't know. I used to think of your father as lightning. And you, Bryce, you will become lightning. You will spark in a big way at some point. I see it. Becoming lightning. Peyton and Bryce embrace as Bryce heads off to bed. And Peyton tells her daughter, your love redeems me. How true. I mean, we see that. They are very close. Your love redeems me. Then Adler enters the kitchen late at night also and has a personal encounter with Peyton that is 100% negative. Good God. This conversation is only about where do we affix blame for all of this? Obviously, it went horribly bad. Eventually, I mean, he made accusations, she made accusations. Ultimately, Peyton simply said, obviously, we still blame each other. Then Adler says out loud, I'll be staying in the guest room, and eventually I will be leaving. And so Peyton says, separation? And he just answers, I don't know. So it looks like separation and divorce are in their future. And, we can't criticize this. I mean, think of that devastation. I don't think I could handle losing my son. I don't think I could handle it. And I do have hope. I have hope in Christ, and my son is in Christ. I am in Christ. So whether in life or in death, my son is in Christ, and I am in Christ. So he has hope, and I have hope. But I still think that's a terrible thing to suffer. I don't know how you could do it. I would have to turn to my church and get some serious help. That's our penultimate lesson, and it's a tragic penultimate lesson, obviously. We have the devastation of the death of a son. And in block 1, we have Peyton caught in a tension between guilt and release, and guilt over feeling release. So we got that block 1, note 3 as a recap. I'll read it again. Father Gabriel says, "It is one thing to not lament the passing of someone who constantly injured you and constantly caused you pain. But now it is time to pass through forgiveness." Then he prayed with Peyton. In block 2, it's got to be note 1. Forgiveness. Would Peyton ever grieve her son and give Bryce her real chance at life? And then here you go, Father Gabriel. Another very good statement from Father Gabriel. He tells Peyton she is to be restored in the sacrament of the Eucharist. She is to be restored in the sacrament of Christ. Where is our hope in time of grieving? It is in the cross and the resurrection that negates the cross. The negation of the negative, the Christ event. Remember Hegel. Hegel says what? The speculative Good Friday is a revelation of the negation of the negative. And that means it applies to grieving as well. Peyton needs the event of the cross and the resurrection in order to find hope, in order to find release, in order to move forward in her eschatological life. And Father Gabriel was correct to tell her that the next step is forgiveness and the Eucharist, the sacrament of Christ. That's going to wrap up our penultimate lesson on First Sons and Last Daughters. There's one final chapter, and then we will have concluded this second novel by Reine in the 3-novel trilogy, the 3-novel saga. That wraps up 295 to 310. Our next lesson, of course, is going to be in Hegel. We've been alternating back and forth between Reine and Hegel. Our next lesson will be in Hegel.